There was an extremely difficult time in my life when I thought that I was destined to be a failure. And had I not escaped that negative, pessimistic mindset, I truly do believe that it would have become a self fulfilling prophecy in a sense. They say that Aristotle, once said that we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. And when I think of those words, it makes me reflect on my actions in the aftermath of a 6 month long manic episode with psychosis that I experienced during my junior year at university. I'm in a totally different place today, and things are going extraordinarily well in many different aspects of my life. Probably the most important of which is that I'm going to be continuing my education. I'll be returning to university and going to obtain my bachelor's degree, hopefully in a few semesters. So I have that to look forward to, but I wouldn't have been able to get to this position were it not for a particular break that I had taken after my mania. So I had this 6 month long manic episode during which I lost control of my central command center. I was living in a frat house at the time. As you can imagine, things became rather chaotic and hectic pretty quickly. Very speedily, I began to develop different delusions and a myriad of hallucinations. Together, these things severely disrupted my life. They hampered my ability to think rationally. They diminished my ability to act rationally. And losing control of your central command center like that, it's a nightmarish experience. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. But it happened to me. And it's a trauma that I lived through. And that's why I talk about it so much on this channel, is because that trauma truly was, I think, a catalyst for where I'm at today. Without that trauma, I would be in a much different place. Whether it'd be a positive place or not, I'm not sure. Something else bad could have happened. Who knows? But it definitely changed the life path that I'm taking. It definitely changed the trajectory of my life for the negative initially. Right now, though, as I said, things are going positive. So, how did we get here? I don't want to start the story off in the middle, which is, I feel like, kind of where we're at right now in terms of my story as it relates to going back to get my education and being on medications successfully. I want to start the story at the beginning. And the beginning was the beginning of my semester, junior year, before the mania, things were going perfect. I had a full time job. I was involved in different extracurriculars and had an eclectic range of activities that I participated in inside and outside of the classroom. I was keeping busy. I was pretty much always preoccupied with someone or something and didn't have a whole lot of free time, but I was passionate about what I was doing, so it didn't really matter to me. Anything fraternity related, it was very easy for me to justify dedicating time towards. Lots of people would say to me, like, oh, you're dedicating all this time to the fraternity and these various projects. Why don't you find some time for yourself? And I would say, like, this is time for myself. This is what I want to do with my time because I'm so passionate about these projects that we're doing, and I want to do them as best, most as effectively as we possibly can. But it would be to my detriment later in the semester when the mania started to creep in. When the mania crept in, it gradually intensified over the course of the semester. But even at the beginning, it was pretty bad. I went a 5 day period without any sleep, and I started getting into arguments with people. I became a very hostile, volatile person. Everything about my life, when you thought about Tyler Adolfo, the word that probably came to mind was unpredictable. Another word that would come to mind is impulsive. because the decisions I made, the decisions I made were arbitrarily made. They weren't grounded in reason. There was no methodology behind them. I was a very spontaneous, sporadic, in the moment person, very garrulous in conversations, which was antithetical to the way I normally conducted myself. And so here I am, a junior at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, slowly losing control of my mind, and I was hospitalized for it. But it didn't do me much good because they didn't put me on any medication and they released me. And I believe it was 5 days. They put me back into the community without any medication, without any follow up plan, without any type of doctors or nurses monitoring me to see if my situation got worse or better. And I was still in a mental health crisis at the time they released me. There's no debate about that. Like, it's an indisputable fact, and I think it was totally unjustified for them to release me the way they did. I could have stopped the manic episode much sooner had I gotten the proper effective treatment that I so desperately required. But it didn't happen, so it is what it is. The next 5 months, my mania got worse, and eventually I would enter into a partial hospitalization program. And this is what I would kind of refer to as my first mental reset. And when I think of the phrase mental reset, what I'm really talking about is it's kind of analogous to, say, an NBA athlete experiencing an injury, right? When they get injured, do they go back onto the court right away? Do they just like sit out for 5 minutes and then they're right back on the court after, say they break their ankle or whatever it may be? No, of course not. It takes them time to recover. They take time away from their sport, from their craft, and they try to physically heal over the course of that time with doctors, professionals, what have you. Well, a mental reset is essentially that, but for your mind. It's taking a break from an injury to your mind. The injury to my mind was six months of mania. And to treat it, I went to a partial hospitalization program. They put me on a medication to pull me out of mania. Before I knew it, it restored my intellectual faculties, and I was able to discern right from wrong again. I was able to discern reality from fiction again, and I was now operating on the basis of reality for the first time in half a year, thanks to starting medications. So this was a pretty significant milestone, and it was my first mental reset. And now, after that, I would experience what I refer to as the second phase of that first mental reset. And the second phase was going through an approximately 18-month-long depressive episode. During that depressive episode, I was at an all-time low. I had been depressed at various points in my life before, but I never experienced depression like I had then. I would spend a majority of my day just laying down in bed, racing with negative self-talk inside of my mind, and at different points hoping that I would no longer be alive. I didn't really want to be here anymore after everything that had transpired. And now that I was on the medications and had my insight and discernment again, I started to recognize everything that had transpired for what it is. An embarrassment, a failure, not just of a failure of myself, but really a failure against the medical system, because when they released me, when they did, it was a totally wrong thing, incorrect thing to do. I feel like if you ask any rational person who knew me then whether or not they thought I should have been released, I guarantee you all of them would have said no. And so it just makes you wonder, why didn't the doctors see it the same way? What was it that led them to release me? But I digress. I was spending most of my day laying around in bed, engaged in negative self-talk, barely went outside, if at all. For a period of time, it was just to go to appointments and sometimes occasionally visit family. But even that, initially, I was extremely embarrassed to do at first, because during my mania, I had intense arguments with family members as well. And so I kind of socially isolated from the entire world. The only person that I knew was myself. Even though I live at home with my mom, it was like I was, in a way, just living by myself because of the way that I chose to isolate myself inside my room on my bed. Eventually, though, I started going outside and I started taking small steps that would later add up to become big steps of progress as it pertains to reclaiming control over my life. Because, here I am, this 20 something year old, 25, 26-year-old, moping around, depressed, no job, no education, and seemingly no hope for the future. And I wanted things to change. But it took time for me to get to that position. It took time for me to heal. I needed that mental reset. I don't think that anybody could have endured the 6 month long manic episode that I did and then immediately transition into, all right, time for a comeback. It's not that easy and it doesn't happen that fast. If it did happen that fast for you, if you've gone through something similar, then all the power to you. But in my case, I needed that mental reset. I needed those 18 months to, yeah, mope around and be depressed. And I just experienced something so traumatic and I needed to come to terms with what happened. And that took time for me to do. But as a result of that mental reset, that major mental reset that I had taken, I was able to eventually get into the gym and start going to the gym. Lost a decent amount of weight. Not as much as I would like, but a decent amount, a good start. I started off with me going to Honeydew in the morning just to get a nice coffee. I'm talking like 4:35 in the morning. And that would be my ritual. I have gone outside for the day. That was my daily win. And then I would go home and do whatever it is that I did. But it was a win nonetheless. And those small wins led to me being able to summon the confidence to go to the gym. And those small wins combined allowed me to summon the confidence to start applying for jobs. And then the confidence to work a job, the confidence to get promoted twice in 7 months and work as a manager, the confidence to start applying to colleges, the confidence to accept a decision from a college and make preparations to go back to college. I'm in a totally fundamentally different place right now than I was during that depressive episode. And even though in some aspects my situation may lightly mirror where I was when I was a junior in college and manic, the stark difference now is that I'm healthy. I'm stable. I have control of my mind. And I cannot state enough how significant that is. I've come so far, but I still got much further to go. If you ever find yourself struggling, consider taking a mental reset. It worked for me and maybe it will work for you. But that's all for this video, y'all. Peace out.